With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. Coming up later, why revoking China's trade status could hit California farmers hard. We'll have more on that coming up. But to start off the day, a drop in U.S. exports to China shows up significantly in the latest trade forecast from the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Generally speaking, our exports are struggling.
USDA's chief economist Seth Myers says exports are down $8.2 billion from last year at $170.5 billion this year.
So unchanged for the new forecast for 2024, but we're still down pretty sharply from the prior year.
Myers says China played a big role. It's now buying less corn and soybeans from the U.S. and more from Brazil.
China falls to our number 3 trading partner, and we're seeing a lot of competition with Brazil into that Chinese market, and that is what is driving our bulk export values.
USDA has not lowered the forecast for ag exports, but has increased the projection for ag imports. While the general tone of USDA's export forecast is down, there are still some products that could see a better export year than they did last year. Gary Crawford has more.
While U.S. bulk product exports are expected to fall this year, world demand for other U.S. products is projected to grow. U.S. livestock product sales continue strong. USDA has added almost $1 billion to its overall forecast for U.S. dairy, poultry, beef, and pork exports. Those expected to total $38.5 billion this year. But beyond livestock, USDA Chief Economist Seth Myers says there are other products expected to do better than last year, including fruits, vegetables, tree nuts, and also one non-food product, and that's ethanol.
For ethanol, we're talking about a $3.5 billion export rising to $4 billion in 2024. That's about a 15% increase year over year in the overall value of ethanol exports.
Myers says ethanol export values this year could match the record set in 2022, and in terms of volume, could break the record of 1.6 billion gallons set in 2018. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
USDA announces a program to help dairy producers during the outbreak of H5N1 virus.
The shape and nature of prevention and protection efforts against the H5N1 virus in dairy cattle, as explained by Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack in early May.
We have said often throughout this process, USDA remains committed to evolving its response and course of action.
Along that approach comes word this week of a new voluntary H5N1 dairy herd status pilot program. USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service is working with state animal health agencies to determine states to participate in the pilot, with enrollment for dairy growers within involved states scheduled to begin this Monday. More details are available at www.aphis.usda.gov/livestock-poultry-disease. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
A recent project to tag and track wild pigs in Canada's prairie provinces is funded by the United States Department of Agriculture. Dennis Guy tells us why.
A recent project to tag and track wild pigs in Canada's prairie provinces is being funded by the United States Department of Agriculture. With recent sightings less than 50 miles from the U.S. border, there is concern that these large, destructive, so-called super pigs will migrate into adjacent northern states. Currently, officials in Montana, North and South Dakota, and Minnesota say they have no wild hog problem and they want to keep it that way. So the University of Saskatchewan, working with the USDA, is catching Canadian prairie wild pigs and fitting them with GPS tracking collars. Dr. Ryan Brook, a professor in the Agriculture and Bioresources Department at the University of Saskatchewan, is heading up the project. He says that his department has been working on a similar project for several years now.
This latest study builds on our work of looking at occurrences and national scale mapping of pigs across Canada, and the next obvious question is, where are they likely to go next? Many of the northern U.S. states don't have any, and they certainly don't want them. This research was actually all funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture to look at putting GPS satellite collars on pigs to track them.
Many parts of the southern U.S. has had a wild boar infestation for many years. However, these typically smaller animals originated from Spanish pigs and tend to prefer a warmer, moderated climate. The Canadian hybrid originated from domestic stock mixed with much larger Eurasian wild boar, which can often reach mature weights of 400 to 500 pounds. Just recently, a pregnant sow was captured that weighed nearly 650 pounds. These animals have adapted well to very cold temperatures due to their size, and they can have more litters, similar to domestic pigs. Dr. Brooks says his team has been using helicopters and net cannon to capture and collar the wild pigs so their herds can be tracked. And Dr. Brook believes the best way to eradicate the roaming herds is with large portable panel traps so that groups of hogs can be caught during the night using food bait.
There has been work to set up these large panel traps and capture entire groups at once. Most of the provinces that have pigs in Canada have been doing that, but they're so smart, so we use helicopter and we shoot a net out to restrain them, to hold them down and get a collar around their neck and then let them go back into the wild.
Like many American states, the Canadian prairie provinces have declared open season hunting on the wild pigs. But Dr. Brooks says the panel traps are far more effective for eradicating the pigs in larger numbers. He believes that shooting individual animals actually does more harm than good, because shooting simply makes the animals even more elusive and disperses the pig herds across the landscape more quickly.
Hunter success is really low. They find a group of pigs, say they shoot 2 or 3 out of a group of 10. Well, the remainder become even more nocturnal. They disperse across the landscape. You can remove animals, but the population doesn't go down.
Reporting from Canada, I'm Dennis Guy.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Could we be headed for a record hurricane season? Rod Bain looks into it in this edition of Agriculture USA.
Might it be a record-setting year for named tropical storms and hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin?
If you look at the accumulated cyclone energy of those storms, that is expected to be in the range of 150 to 245% of the long-term average when you add up all of the intensities and durations of the expected storms in 2024. It's likely to be very significantly above average.
I'm Rod Bain. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey is among those joining us as we look at the forecast for both potential Atlantic and Pacific tropical storms and hurricanes in 2024. In this edition of Agriculture USA. What are the percentages of an above-average tropical storm and hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin in 2024? The administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Rick Spinrad, offered that prognostication during the recent announcement of this year's hurricane outlook.
There's an 85% chance of an above-normal season, a 10% chance of a near-normal season, and a 5% chance of a below-normal season.
Put another way, that accuracy rate translates to
forecast for named storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes is the highest NOAA has ever issued for the May outlook.
That forecasted range between 17 to 25 named storms, with between 8 to 13 of those storms predicted to become hurricanes, and a range from 4 to 7 named storms elevating to major hurricane status. That's Category 3 or above. So what are some of the factors behind the forecast?
The official CPC forecast indicates a 77% chance of La Nina forming during the August-October timeframe. We know the development of La Nina can lead to weaker easterly trade winds and below-average vertical wind shear in the tropical Atlantic Ocean. This type of environment can be more conducive for tropical cyclone development.
In addition, record warm water temperatures are reported for much of the tropical Atlantic Ocean.
Forecast modeling indicates that above-average sea surface temperatures are predicted during the peak months of the Atlantic hurricane season from August to October. October. Warm sea surface temperatures are an important factor in rapid intensification of tropical cyclones to major hurricane status, and that major hurricanes contribute significantly to the measurement of ACE, the accumulated cyclone energy, ACE.
And why ACE measurements are significant when it comes to forecasting Atlantic hurricane seasons is because
in past years when we've seen high ACE numbers, those have historically been the years with the most destructive hurricanes, and this season NOAA is forecasting the second highest ACE for our May outlook.
Now, while National Weather Service Director Ken Graham says the Atlantic hurricane forecast sounds alarming, there is no need to be alarmed, especially if citizens and communities in potential impact zones take the time now to prepare for a potential tropical system. He adds in preparations, it's not just winds that should concern persons about tropical storms and hurricanes.
We looked at 2013 to 2023 to really reevaluate some of the numbers and where we see the most fatalities. 90% of fatalities result from water.
He adds preparation for tropical storms is just not a coastal concern, but also in places far inland. In 1969,
we had more direct fatalities during Hurricane Camille in Virginia than we did where the landfall was in Mississippi. That was a Category 5. It was that inland rain.
Federal Emergency Management Agency Deputy Administrator Eric Hook says tropical storm and hurricane preparation involves taking time to understand a person's unique risk.
Do you have medication that requires refrigeration? Do you have a medical device that requires electricity? Do you have mobility challenges that make evacuations harder? Now is the time to ask yourself these questions. Understand your risks and put a plan in place so that you're prepared when disaster strikes.
With built-in resiliency from preparation, jump-starting any needed recovery efforts. While significant tropical storm activity is expected in the Atlantic Basin this summer and fall, opposite climate conditions and La Nina factors are found in the Pacific Basin, which USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says is reflected in the 2024 tropical system forecast for that region.
Pretty good likelihood that we'll see below normal activity,
with National Weather Service forecast indicating there is
a 60% likelihood of below average tropical activity in 2024 in the Eastern Pacific.
The official Eastern Pacific hurricane forecast calls for 11 to 17 named storms, 4 to 9 hurricanes, and 1 to 4 major hurricanes this year. This has been Agriculture USA. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. We will be back in just a moment. Coming up in a few moments, we'll have today's This Land of Ours report, but first, more of the day's agriculture news. And with today's AgNet West headlines, here's Brian German.
A new study warns that increasing tariffs on Chinese goods could ultimately cost California ag exporters up to $1 billion annually. Economists from UC Davis and North Dakota State University predict significant economic losses if the U.S. revokes China's permanent normal trade relations status and subsequent tariffs are put on American ag products going into the Chinese market. Experts estimate that revoking the most favored nation tariff rates could reduce California's agricultural exports to China by 28 to 34%, particularly affecting products like almonds and pistachios. California's ag exports to China have grown from $200 million in 2001 to over $2.6 billion in 2023. The last trade war between the U.S. and China caused severe drops in crop prices and lost export opportunities. The study underscores the difficulties of regaining lost market access and highlights the potential for significant economic harm and job losses in California's agricultural sector. Recent tariff increases by the Biden administration on various Chinese products raise concerns of another potential trade war. Over the past 3 years, Truterra has paid over $21 million to farmers for sequestering and reducing over 1.1 million metric tons of carbon. The carbon program has seen significant growth, with acres enrolled increasing by 151% between 2021 and 2022, and then again increasing by 99% between 2022 and 2023. The program pays farmers based on actual carbon stored, not a set per acre rate. Last year, farmer participation in the program also grew by 58%. As a subsidiary of Land O'Lakes, Truterra works to support farmers through local ag retail advisors, helping them make affordable agronomic decisions. The company noted that the carbon program plays an important role in helping organizations meet sustainability goals and creating new markets for farmers. The U.S. Department of Agriculture announced an $83 million investment in domestic fertilizer projects across 12 states to strengthen competition and lower costs for American farmers. The funding's part of President Biden's Investing in America agenda and aims to spur economic growth and job creation in rural communities. The Fertilizer Production Expansion Program grants will help modernize equipment, adopt new technologies, and build production plants. To date, USDA has invested $251 million in 57 projects across 29 states through the program. The initiative responds to the doubling of fertilizer prices between 2021 and 2022, exacerbated by factors like the war in Ukraine and industry monopolies. The program's part of a larger strategy to enhance supply chains, create economic opportunities, and support climate-smart innovations. Dairy margins are projected to improve overall compared to 2023. Senior dairy analyst with Rabo AgriFinance, Lucas Fees, highlighted the outlook from their Q2 report titled Searching for Equilibrium.
And I think that speaks to how the market has been kind of watching a variety of supply and demand factors and really trying to figure out where we go from here for the rest of the year. Just for context, I think if I look back to 2023, it was a pretty challenging year for dairy farmers. Milk prices not that high. Feed prices still quite elevated, and profitability, I think, was a little bit challenged throughout 2023 and into the first several months of 24. I do think, though, that the better news is we expect more of a positive margin outlook as we move forward through the rest of the year.
The Regulatory Alignment Concept Paper from the California Department of Food and Agriculture outlines initial proposals for streamlining agriculture-related food safety and water quality reporting requirements. A workshop series will be used to gather feedback and comments to help further define opportunities to streamline regulatory policies and programs. Sessions going over the Produce Safety Program are scheduled for June 4th and July 11th. Sessions highlighting the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program will be held on June 12th and July 16th. The workshops for the Confined Animal Facilities Program are scheduled for June 20th and July 24th. The final sessions will be going over the state winery order and will be taking place on June 26th and July 30th. More information about the sessions is available at cdfa.ca.gov/regulatory alignment. I'm Brian German for AgNet West Radio Network.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack was joined by U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow recently to announce the allocation of $300 million to 66 U.S. organizations under the new Regional Agricultural Promotion Program, or RAP, to build demand for American food and farm exports in diverse markets around the world. They made that announcement and gave more details during a call with the media. Here are their remarks during that call.
Very pleased to announce the first round of funding under the new Regional Agricultural Promotion Program, which was launched in October of 2023 at the direction of Chairwoman Stabenow and Ranking Member Senator Bozeman, as part of USDA's commitment under the Biden-Harris administration to create more new and better markets at home and abroad. At that time, we authorized $1.2 billion in Commodity Credit Corporation funding to help American agricultural exporters diversify their footprint beyond traditional and established markets. We've long been a global leader in food and agricultural exports, but nearly 60% of our exports go to just 4 markets: China, Mexico, Canada, and the European Union. And as we've seen in recent history, there are devastating consequences if we rely on just a few large markets. We remain committed to our established customer base around the world, but we're also setting our sights on new growth opportunities in places like Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, where opportunities are significant and where U.S. exporters may not have yet established a firm foothold. These are part of the world where the GDP is rising, middle classes are expanding, urban populations are growing, and retail food systems are becoming more modern. All of this, we believe, creates a demand for greater variety of high-quality food and farm products, which the U.S. can produce. That's where RAP comes into play. By enabling U.S. exporters to expand their footprint in diverse and dynamic new markets, RAP will help make them more competitive and resilient in an increasingly volatile global trading environment. In November, the Foreign Agricultural Service began accepting applications for the first $300 million of RAP funding. We prioritized 3 areas: Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and Southeast Asia. and specifically set aside $25 million at a minimum to fund activities in Africa, which has some of the fastest growing economies but the lowest level of U.S. export market investment of any region in the world. Stakeholder interest in RAP was evident and overwhelming. We received over $1 billion in project proposals for the $300 million that was available in funding. And today, I'm pleased to share that this funding will go to over 60 partner organizations that will help build demand for U.S. farm and food exports in high potential markets around the globe. We'll be funding hundreds of projects encompassing a wide and vast variety of products and markets, building demand for U.S. meat exports in Africa, to promoting U.S. olives in Latin America, to knocking down trade barriers for Hawaiian coffee in Japan. We know the potential is out there, but it will take time, consistency, and money to grow new and expanded markets. Our presence in these markets, building relationships with trading partners, and dedicated promotional activities are absolutely necessary, and USDA is pleased to be able to provide the startup capital to tap into these opportunities. We're serious about reversing the decline of small and mid-sized farms and building wealth at stage of rural communities, and exports obviously a critically important component of this. As you all know, USDA offers more than 20 different export-focused programs that provide grants, loan guarantees, technical assistance, and other export-focused support to producers and agribusinesses of all sizes and type. We're now proud to add RAP to the toolbox, in addition to our new Assisting Specialty Crop Exports, or ACE initiative, under which FAS is now accepting proposals from partners to implement targeted projects to help specialty crop producers overcome trade barriers and expand export opportunities. The bottom line is that we want to make sure our foreign market development programs and agricultural trade in general work for the full spectrum of American agricultural producers, regardless of their size, their location, their product, or target market. By investing in exports, we're investing in the future of American agriculture and rural communities. And analysis have shown time and time again that for every dollar the U.S. government invests in our market development programs, exports are increased by more than $24. I venture to say that return on investment will only increase with these new programs and the innovative projects that they're supporting. We're excited about the partnerships that we've developed with the organizations receiving funding, and we appreciate the leadership and direction Senator Stabenow has provided in suggesting that we utilize the CCC for this important purpose. And with that, I will turn it over to the chairwoman for her remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Secretary Vilsack. This is a great day. I'm so appreciative of your leadership, and thank you to Undersecretary Taylor, Administrator Whitley, and your staff. And I'm so grateful that my partner, Senator Bozeman, joined me as we reached out to you. It's been terrific to see that we are all on the same page in terms of a vision of how we continue to support and grow our farmers and ranchers, our agricultural economy, and the fact that you're making this announcement today is such a big win for all our farmers. And you mentioned specialty crops, which, of course, I appreciate the focus on their unique needs as well, and also the fact that you're broadening to other countries. A number of years ago, I had a chance as the chair of the Agriculture Committee to lead a delegation to Africa and see all of the potential of what was happening there, and I know there's so much more that we can do together. So I'm very grateful for all of this. I think that it's important to also stress the fact that when we look at over the years what's happened, that creating new markets is absolutely critical for our producers. And ag exports have grown from $66 billion back in 1996 to more than $175 billion last year, supporting more than 1 million jobs on and off the farm. And today's announcement is going to just add to that. You know, as we have done the hearings leading up to our work now on the Farm Bill, the top two things we heard about was trade promotion and strengthening crop insurance, those two things. And we heard over and over again that our commodity groups wanted us to be able to double the amount of resources available over the next 5 years on trade promotion, on marketing for large commodities, but also smaller operations. And so this announcement, I mean, what the USDA is doing is through Secretary Vilsack's leadership is going to meet that goal, the goal we have heard of from farmers and ranchers of wanting to double the resources available in the next 5 years to focus on selling our great produce, the things that we grow, the things that we make around the world. And it's very, very good news. So I just want to say thank you, and look forward to continuing to work with you as we move forward on all the different fronts to make sure all of the organizations understand what resources are available and that we're working with them to create these new markets. And the bottom line is create new revenue for the folks that have the riskiest business in the world when they're reaching out and dealing with all the issues they have to deal with right now, with climate crisis hitting them right over their head, and all the other marketing issues in the global economy, all the various issues. This is a really important way to support them. So thanks very much.
This is the AgNet News Hour. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. For today's featured interview, I'm talking with Tyler Harp, the technical product lead for Syngenta row crop fungicides, about a product that he says has had a bit of a renaissance.
So Maravus Neo was launched in 2018, but we've had a significant amount of adoption, and we've had some really, really good results. I think one of the things that's kind of interesting about, these kinds of products is that, you can do small plot trials and you can, determine, the efficacy, but until you get it out in commercial settings, then only then really do you get the true appreciation that the value that a plant health product like Maravus Neo can deliver. And so that's why we've kind of had renewed excitement over the last few years with just some of the spectacular results that we've seen, the satisfaction that the growers and customers are experiencing with the product. And so, sometimes, because it's a technical thing, right? It's, we tested across all these different situations. There's really no way you could support a scale of that size in an R&D program, right? So we've always been excited about it. But the last few years we've it's been well adopted, and we've gained considerable market share as a result of it. So it's still growing, and there's a lot of excitement, and for some people it probably still is new.
So you mentioned row crops. Is this good for all row crops, or are there specific crops?
It's kind of funny because there's different ways that folks define those. So I'm glad you asked. Row crops, for the most part, row crops are corn and soybeans and cereals. It can also include things like sorghum, which has a Maravus Neo label. Sometimes, canola might be lumped in there. But it doesn't necessarily mean crops that are planted in a row, but it's usually the more grain crops, right? So we have like the horticultural crops, which would be, your fruit and veg and your, potatoes, peanut, things like that. Row crops would be more the corn and soybeans primarily.
So tell me a little bit about Maravus Neo and what makes it special.
Absolutely. So Maravus Neo actually contains 3 different fungicides, 3 different mode of action fungicides that are contained in the one product. And one of those is the newer fungicide that we brought to the market in 2018 when we launched this product, and we hadn't had that we haven't used that fungicide in time previous to that. So it received its federal registration, the Section 3 federal registration in 2018. And so, typically fungicides are sold in mixtures. So we had a really good fungicide that we've added adependent technology to, which of course made it even better. So adependent technology is really the novel proprietary component of Maravus Neo. It is a carboxamide SDHI fungicide. So it's within the carboxamide chemical class, which is a very differentiated chemical class. There are other carboxamide SDHIs fungicides on the market, but none of them are in this specific subclass of carboxamide chemistry that adependent technology fits in. So it is really novel and unique, even among some of the other fungicides that folks might think are similar because they share a mode of action. But there's more than just the mode of action, right? We also look at the spectrum. Marevis Neo is very unique in that it controls fusarium. That adepidin technology component is very active on fusarium. And that's kind of a gap that most all the other competitors have. So if you're using a fungicide in corn and you have a lot of fusarium ear rot, the Marevis Neo is going to help protect against that really emerging and quite devastating disease if you get it in your field. So the adepidin technology is also a plant health fungicide. And what we mean by plant health is its ability to preserve yield potential, not only in the presence of disease, which is kind of like what we would refer to as sort of biotic stresses, but also abiotic stresses, such as such as heat or drought. So it's really about preservation of yield in the presence of biotic or abiotic stress that occur in your field. And our data shows that most of the time you're going to have enough stress, whether it's environmental or disease. And typically, when you have less disease, it's often because there's less moisture in that time of year, in that season, and so or at that location specifically. So when you have less moisture, you typically have less disease, but you also can start to drought the plant. And so what we see with the adepidin technology is that it helps preserve moisture in the leaves. It helps preserve the photosynthetic capacity, which is essentially the component in the leaf that helps to manage light energy. So we have more efficient use of light energy. We have less, like I said, kind of a conservation of water, so less water loss. Water loss actually comes out as vapor through the stomata in the leaf, which are little pores in the leaf. So it helps to preserve some water loss. It also provides some nutrient use efficiency. And finally, the third big component that fits into these sort of plant health buckets, if you will, is the stalk quality. So we know that when corn leaves, when the corn plant gets stressed and the leaves start getting stressed, whether it's from disease or whether it's from drought, they'll start pulling starches and carbohydrates from the stalk, compromising the integrity of that stalk, and then you're prone to lodging. And it also will slow down the efficiency and speed of your combine. And so, there's been a lot of studies done that, 1.5 miles per hour slower, if you have a 5,000 acre farm, that actually could end up being about $20 per acre just in revenue from the cost of harvesting. So we have a lot of growers, and I know a lot of folks that use the Syngenta plant health fungicide really for that key purpose and not as much concerned about disease. And one of the things that we have realized is as I mentioned, we launched in 2018. And at that point, we could do really large commercial on-farm demos and, large strip trials, if you will. And we'll have the treated, next to a big block of untreated, and we might have other products in there as well. It's hard to do that before registration because we have to do a crop destruct. If the product is not registered, that crop has to be destroyed. So it's only after you get registration that you can really use these large on-farm type demonstrations and really see the true value that these products like Marevis Neo can offer in terms of its ability to preserve yield, not only in the presence of disease, but even in situations where disease didn't come in and you have those plant health benefits that kick in. And so we'll also see a preservation of yield there as well. So, I think, we like to say that these are no longer your father or your grandfather's fungicides. And we encourage folks, if they used a fungicide a few years ago and they didn't feel like they got much out of it, we always say, well, try these. They've changed a lot, and the value that they provide is tremendous over some of the older row crop fungicides. And it's all due to that adepidin technology that we've added in there. So really good preservation of yield potential. We see 15 to 18 bushels per acre on average over the untreated, and that's across the Corn Belt. Since we've launched Marevis Neo, we've done about 100 or 150 large on-farm commercial strip trials throughout the Corn Belt each year. So we've got 6-7 years of data there that we can use to compare how did these products perform in seasons like 2020, which was really dry. In part of the Corn Belt, the season of 2020 was really dry, and in 2021 happened to be really wet. Of course, that was what brought in a lot of tar spot that we had in 2020. But our data showed that even in 2020, when probably if folks were only concerned about controlling disease and knowing it was really dry and that the disease thresholds were low, and that when we scouted the fields, we weren't seeing a lot of disease, but we still averaged 14 bushels per acre across all of those locations. There was about 100 of them. And so, okay, it's 15 to 18 when we have a little bit more disease or we have some combined stresses, but even in the absence of disease, we're still seeing this benefit. And it's something you can visually see as well. When we walk into a treated cornfield, next to an untreated block, let's say, and we can go in there, and even if there's not disease in the untreated, right? So that there's not much the fungicide's doing to contribute in terms of disease because the untreated strip doesn't have any disease. But at the same time, what we find is that we can visually see the greener leaves. We can often visually see less leaf curl. We can see that the leaves in the sort of mid to lower canopy are still turgid. They still have some water in them. In the untreated, those leaves are hanging down. They're less turgid because as I mentioned, Maribus neo helps to conserve water by minimizing water vapor loss through the leaf. So it gives you a little bit more of a thicker canopy that can be used for energy for that plant to generate yield. And then finally, of course, the stalk quality. And you can really see this in the field. And it comes out when you start pulling the ears as well. And you pulling these corn ears, you can see that there's better tip fill where we had used the Maribus neo. So these are the kinds of, when I mentioned earlier, these are the kinds of exciting things that we see when we go into the field, and especially in these large on-farm commercial operations, and just see the value and the vigor that these products contribute.
All right. Is there a website or something that people can go to?
Yes, boostyourbushels.com is a website that we've put together with our tech services team, and it has a lot of the information about adaptive technology that I talked about. It talks a lot about the plant health potential of these products, and it shows data that we've generated year after year across all these farms in the Corn Belt.
Tyler Hart, Technical Product Lead for Syngenta Row Crop Fungicides. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. Now for more news. U.S. Agriculture has its first seat on the National Work Readiness Council. Lori Boyer reports.
National FFA CEO Scott Stump has been selected to sit on the National Work Readiness Council.
It does work in workforce development, training, and advocacy, and originally it was formed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce almost 2 decades ago. So in the early 2000s, when we were in somewhat the same shape we're in right now of not having enough bodies that had the skills necessary to step into the workplaces that are needed to grow businesses across all industries.
This is the first time that the ag industry has had a seat at this council, and Stump says it is important to be at the table. He explains some of the work that the National FFA Association has done in trying to find out exactly what workforce gaps there are.
Specifically in the agriculture area, and we just did a gap analysis 2 years ago, expanding our work around ag tech and really looking at the applications of the emerging technology that's coming out, not just from the use, but more importantly from the servicing and the maintenance and the installation of that technology. And then work around sustainability as we look across all of the companies, our wonderful corporate partners. They are looking for all of the students, no matter what role they'll play in the company, to bring and be able to bring a sustainability lens to it.
Stump says to address that gap, National FFA has created Ag Explorer 2.0, which allows students to explore career options, which now include sustainability, ag tech, and skilled trades. As for the council, Stump says they hope to share successful programs and resources to help students and adults re-engaging in their career to look at filling the mentioned workforce gaps.
That's today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.